Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Charles, and if you're struggling to lose weight on a plant-based diet or really any kind of diet and you're struggling with your consistency and your habits and you don't know what to eat to lose weight, then this is the channel for you. But before we get into anything, I just wanted to show you the shirt that I'm wearing, Coastal Cruisers, and then look at the back. I don't know if you can see. How freaking cool is this? So I'm part of this little girls skate group in my town, and they made this merch and I'm freaking just loving this shirt so much. So anyway, excited about that. So the breaking news last week was that my home country of New Zealand hit the spotlight on a major world stage, and not in a good way, because Otago University researchers released what they're calling the first ever weight loss device, which kind of looks like a torture device that you attach to your teeth, and it basically stops you being able to open your mouth properly. So on one hand, I'm quite torn about this, because anytime New Zealand hits the news, I feel like that's an accomplishment, because we're pretty tiny. I think we have like 5 million people in the whole entire country. On the other hand, this is not something that should have gone past the ethics committee. There's obviously a lot of problems with this device and the concept in general. And what I wanted to do in this video is I wanted to go over just a few of what I believe are the misconceptions that the fact that something like this can exist highlight about what, even at a top level, people do not understand about weight loss. So to quote one of the researchers, they said, it's a non-invasive, reversible, economic, and attractive alternative to surgical procedures. And in fact, there is no adverse consequences to this whatsoever. So there's obviously been absolutely huge backlash to this. People are comparing it to like a chastity belt and a modern day torture device. It's been pretty insane, and I just wanted to read you some of the comments that have been coming around on Twitter, because they're good, guys. So Chris said, speaking of odd medieval devices, have a great idea about how to prevent STDs, hit me up. Earthy Undertones, replying to the Otago University, said, thanks Otago, but I'm way ahead of you. And we're going to get into this kind of comment later on, and why this kind of thinking with this weight loss device is just so flawed. And this lady said, not to be gross here, but if someone vomits while wearing this, they will choke to death or aspirate. Also bad for dental hygiene. You can't brush or properly floss. It's just a bad idea all around. And this last comment, which was delete it, delete the research team, delete everything, they are horrified. So obviously it's shocking in the way that this works, like literally gluing your mouth or magnetically putting two things together that magnetically clip together, and that effectively wires your mouth shut. So it's horrifying, right? And it actually costs $24,000 to install. So, I mean, I don't know what part of affordable these guys are thinking, but apart from the fact that, it's kind of like a torture device, it's almost like the mask that the guy in Hannibal Lecter was wearing, the lesson in this is that it highlights such a fundamental misunderstanding about how weight loss works and why we have this obesity epidemic. And chances are, like, looking at this, you've actually felt desperate enough to try something like this. When I was putting this out on my Instagram, I was letting people know that this existed and asking what people thought. Quite a lot of women messaged me and said that their mums actually did something similar in the 80s and that it was absolute torture for them. I understand that feeling of desperation, and I remember when I first got pregnant and I wasn't actually too worried about getting morning sickness, because I thought, well, maybe that'll be a good way that I can actually lose some weight. Turns out I had extreme morning sickness. I had a mild form of hyperemesis, which is absolutely horrible. I do not wish that on anyone, and completely backfired on me, because when I could eat and when I wasn't vomiting, I was just eating McDonald's. Anyway, I know that feeling of desperation. You've probably been there as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at two main assumptions that an industry that can promote this kind of a device is assuming. So number one is how you eat is what causes weight loss or causes weight gain, not what you eat. So the way that this device works is they're wanting you to go on like basically a liquid diet. So it's a forced liquid diet. Well, you pretty much can't open your mouth properly. But let's actually test that hypothesis. I went to Burger Fuel and I bought a vegan milkshake. So this is a soy vegan milkshake. Now, this is the kind of thing that, I mean, even if my mouth was shut, I'm trying to wire it in there. You got 2 millimeters, right? That's sickly sweet, guys. That's sickly sweet. That's about 450 calories. Let's keep testing. This is about 20 calories. Can't get it in there. This is kind of awkward. Also can't eat an apple. So you can get down one of these for 450 calories. It might have been 350, okay? Don't quote me on that. You can't eat 20 calories. So this is a fundamental problem that you see in just even these concepts of controlling like portion sizes or any kind of surgery that is shrinking your stomach. And people report that they can't fit in something like an apple, they can't eat a salad, but they'll eat a chocolate bar because that can fit into their shrunken stomach. And to give you an example of what I mean in this, have a look at these two examples. We've got 2 whole buttercup, in New Zealand we call these buttercup, or kabuka squash, not acorn squash. They are different things. We've had a debate about this online before. These are 2 whole buttercups, and then you've got about 140 grams of chocolate. These 2 foods weigh about, obviously they weigh vastly different amounts, but they're about the same amount of calories. So this was never a volume issue, and it's always going to be a calorie issue. And any diet that stops you eating the lowest calorie, most nutritious, most unprocessed food on the planet, like one of these, is counterintuitively, but somehow still promoted, but it's not a good idea. So think keto as well. You're telling people to cut out fruit. You're telling people to cut out whole grains, potatoes. These are some of the lowest calorie dense foods on the planet. It was never about volume, guys. It was never about how you eat. It was always about what you eat. So take that away. That's number 1. But here you'll see it in things like I said, you have to eat fully keto. That keto is going to get you lose weight, or fully raw, or zero fat, or paleo. All of these ideas assume that how you eat is going to be what determines whether you lose weight or not whether you get into a calorie deficit. And a calorie deficit is the vital ingredient to you being able to lose fat. And turns out it's actually quite easy to lower your calorie consumption without going hungry, without cutting out whole food groups or portion sizes or macronutrients, and without having to wear effectively a chastity belt for your mouth. And I want to share a little personal story about how this has affected me, this kind of thinking about how you eat is more important than what you eat. And for a long time, I tried to be a fully raw vegan. When I heard about fully raw veganism, there was a lot of people that were super skinny. I wanted to look like them, they had abs. And so I was chasing this idea that I had to eat fully raw. And what it led to was this kind of like restrict and then binge pattern where I would either be fully into this raw diet, and then the minute that I ate something cooked or I ate something processed, I would be like, well, I've stuffed it up, you know, I've broken the rules. I'm sorry, raw gods, that I didn't follow your dogma anymore. And here's the thing, I believe a lot of people who do a raw diet, like they're doing it for health reasons, like that's great, that's awesome. But as soon as you start to tell people, or that you start to believe that it's what you're doing, then when you're not doing that thing, you're like, well, too bad, I'm just not going to do this anymore. And that was me. I was stuck in that cycle for a very long time. When I understood about a calorie deficit and I realized, okay, so this is about my overall calorie consumption and I need to lower that by eating mostly lower calorie foods, then I stopped this all in or all out mindset, because I realized if I had a treat, if I had an occasional milkshake, it wasn't going to make or break my progress as long as I was in that calorie deficit. I never strived again to be fully raw because I didn't need to be fully anything. I just needed to eat in a way that got me to my goals. So the second assumption that a device like this and an industry that can produce it assumes is that willpower, or lack thereof, is the main reason that people gain weight. And guys, we should know this, like this is the idea that willpower is behind, or lack of, is behind the obesity epidemic. This is such antiquated thinking. The data does not support this to be true. Yes, if you are trying to lose weight right now, I do not believe that you have a willpower issue, but we'll get into that. So we as a population in the Western world have been steadily gaining weight since the 70s. It just is beyond common sense to think that suddenly an entire population and multiple countries with millions of people just let go of their willpower and develop these uncontrollable tendencies. No, the fact of the matter is that we are in a vastly different food environment than we were 50, 60, 70 years ago. And when you actually track the amount of calories that are coming into the market, you look at how many calories are produced per person, as that has risen, we have seen a corresponding rise in people's weight gain. So simply put, we have a higher calorie environment than we ever have in history, and the weight gain that we have as a society is a complete reflection of that problem. So willpower has not much to do with it until you really try to resist the food environment and you start to go, okay, I really need a lot of it. Most simply, this is brain chemistry. You're in a high dopamine hit environment, and those kind of foods are designed by scientists to elicit a response in your brain that is hyperactive. And this is the reason that it's so incredibly hard to stop eating processed food, or even minimize that, or even have that at a lower kind of acceptable level that's still going to get you losing weight, because they just give you that high. The good news here is that you have massive influence over the thing that is going to block your consistency like nothing else. Hunger! Yay! Okay, so picture this for me. I'm sure you've had like a massive Christmas dinner or Thanksgiving. You guys just did Thanksgiving. A lot of Americans anyway. So you have that big meal and you've stuffed yourself with food and you've had dessert, and then someone brings out your absolute favorite foods. A lot of the time, you don't even want to eat that. Why is that? If this is so highly stimulating, if it's so hard to resist processed food, then why do you not get that feeling? Because you have satisfied your hunger. So once hunger is fully satisfied, it makes it much easier to resist those kind of foods, not reach for those higher calorie processed foods which are going to contribute to weight gain, and to actually not even need a ton of willpower. That's a win for me. And this is one of the reasons that portion control normally backfires, because when you're super hungry, your inhibitions go. You don't care about 6 months from now looking good in a bikini. You're just gonna want those chips when you're hungry. And think about something like portion control. It goes into this idea again, this first assumption that how you eat is the most important factor when it comes to fat loss. But when you compare these two examples, you can see that volume wise, you're gonna get a lot more full on one of these meals for the same amount of calories as the other one. So how much you eat is not as big a factor. How you eat, guys. How you eat is not as much of a factor as what you eat. And I wanted to share the study with you which highlights how incredibly successful this method of eating can be, even without restriction or getting people to exercise or control their portion sizes. So this was a study, yay, again, that was done in New Zealand, where participants were split into two randomized groups. On one hand, you had people who had standardized medical intervention, and then the other group would pretty much just told bi-weekly how to implement a low-fat, whole foods, plant-based diet. So the study ran for 3 months. There was no intervention in terms of exercise or telling people that they had to eat a certain amount of calories. It was just education. At the end of those 3 months, the participants in the whole foods plant-based study had lost on average 19 pounds compared to the control group who had effectively lost none. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The researchers went back 6 months later to see how much weight these people had gained back. And this is so fascinating to me because weight loss is so incredibly ineffective with most methods that even the standard of a good weight loss intervention will be whether they gained back less weight than a control group. So it's not even losing weight a lot of the time. It's not even keeping weight off. It's just gaining back less than someone in a control group, or gaining less than someone who is not in that weight loss intervention. In this study, at the 6-month mark, with no previous intervention for those last 3 months, the study participants in the whole foods plant-based diet section had lost 27 pounds on average. And a year later, they had kept most of it off. So eating enough and staying full and satisfied is one of the pieces of the puzzle to getting consistent in a hyper stimulating environment. And I share lots of tips about how to deal with motivation and willpower and habits on my YouTube channel, but I believe hunger is always the first place to start. When we have such brilliant studies like this, I struggle to understand how researchers and the traditional diet industry come up with such ineffective...
That's me.
You wanna come here?
That's me
Oh.
here. Mom, can I just have one drink of that?
No, you've had some. She wants the good stuff. Like I was saying, it's mind-boggling how traditional diet industries still can come up with such ineffective, barbaric, and torturous band-aid fixes like this device. You do not need to torture yourself to get and stay lean. So I always thought that this had to be difficult. I struggled for nearly a decade before I understand this concept of eating more lower calorie foods and focusing on habit change rather than the how to eat, fully raw or fully stuffing my face in pizza. Wherever you are on your weight loss journey, there are two things that are most important for you to focus on to be effective and really make this as enjoyable and easy as it can be. Number one is choose low calorie dense foods to make up a predominant portion of your diet. These are things like non-starchy vegetables, it's things like fruit, it's things like whole grains, potatoes. All of these foods, if it doesn't come in a package, if it came straight from the ground and all you have to do is wash it or peel it or cook it, chances are it is low in calorie density and it is good for you. Please don't go and eat some poisonous mushrooms and say Chelsea told me they were good for me. I do not accept that, alright. Number two is focusing on habit change that increases your consistency, and that is going to start with eating enough so that you do not go hungry. And a great place to start for understanding more about habit change is these two books, which I absolutely love, and that is Atomic Habits and Essentialism. And maybe you didn't know, but I also have a weight loss course which is focused on these two things. Number one, the how of weight loss, which is all about what to eat, portion sizes, foods, all of those kind of things, how to design your meals. And then number two, all about habits and behavioral change, because this is the vital part that a lot of people miss. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and the key takeaways from that are always to be examining whether what you're doing is a how or is it a what. Are you focused obsessively about how to eat, forgetting what actually leads to weight loss? I know I was. I think that's a really common mistake to make. And then again, looking at how do I increase my consistency? I'm living in a hyper-caloric environment. I'm living in a hyper-palatable, brain chemistry stimulating environment where foods like this are cheap and easy and just light up your brain in a major intense way. Thinking about how you can get consistent in that, how you can make that easier for yourself so that you do not need willpower. I hope you've liked this video. Let me know in the comments what you think of this dental device. If you're new here and you're wondering about how to get started on a plant-based healthy weight loss journey, check out this video right here, which has got my top 5 tips for how to lose weight on a plant-based diet. I'll see you next week.